For this assignment, I will be doing a narrated PowerPoint slide on the risk assessment of a chemical attack on U.S. soil and the devastating consequences of such an attack. We will go into detail about the influencing factors that are going to aggravate this incident, some examples of those factors. We will go in detail on hazard identification so we can see the level of danger that an attack of this magnitude can have in the country. And we will also see, as stated earlier, the associated consequences that a possible attack of this sort will have within the nation. The influencing factors that I have chosen as the principle of this presentation, so the main factors essentially, are going to be organized crime, more specifically, not just any organized crime, but cartel groups in the south border. That's one. And our second one is going to be ideology. More specifically on ideology, we will have extremist organizations of all sorts. So we have here cartel organizations and extremist organizations. As we move forward into our presentation, we can actually see in these few pictures clear examples of the ability of the cartel to essentially transport drugs, money, or anything that they need to transport with very high levels of complexity. Here in the fixed picture, we have what is actually called a narco sub. It's essentially a submarine that dives underwater it dives for a minimal distance, but it can still dive. Carries a large amount of drugs. It doesn't have any offensive capabilities like weapons and such, because simply they couldn't defend themselves in that way. Their simple job is to sneak in, not to cause any trouble per se in that way, like in offensive capabilities and weapons. But it just goes to show their ability. Our picture down shows on our left down corner shows a very complex tunnel that the cartels use to transport the drugs. Electricity, it has rail tracks. So they basically have like a mini train version down there that they can just roll across. So they don't even have to carry this stuff anymore. They can just roll it. Our top right picture shows a private jet fully loaded with narcotics. And last but not least, our bottom right, which for me is one of the most impressive pictures, is the level of militarized weapons and the military structure that these groups have. They ride around in armored vehicles. They have military gear. Not only the weapons, but they have armor, boots, knee pads. So if I see this picture and I do not know any better, that looks pretty much like the Mexican army, if not better armed than the Mexican army. And this convoy right here, because there's a video, shows 30, 40, 50 pickup trucks, if not more. So this four pictures combined just tells you their level of complexity, their level of organization. They have a command structure, just like the military. The amount of money and power that these organizations have is just incredible. Now, what is the hazard? What is the deal with cartels and terrorist organizations? Well, cartels can transport, and the extremist groups need the transport to get to the United States. So these cartels can work together with extremist terrorist organizations, which, by the way, is not hypothetical, as these groups have worked together in the past. Cartels know a thing or two on how to smuggle things into the country. And I say this is not hypothetical because we have caught terrorists in the border before. So I am not making up a scenario of what will happen and so on and so forth. This has happened before. It is proven to be a vulnerability within our borders. I think that has, due to the apprehension of illegal aliens, due to the fact that we have found terrorists in the border, that has been proven to be an issue. On this slide, we can see, top left, the ability of the cartel to transfer people over in many different ways. Bottom right, we can see that these people can sneak in and, for example, terrorist organizations, just as much as this person is covered, they can also put a terrorist in there with, let's say, just a suicide bomber. And then as he pulls up to the border checkpoints, if he's discovered, he can blow himself up with chemicals in a Customs and Border Protection checkpoint, affecting many agents, or a conventional explosive. That's if they get caught. If not, they can always just keep going and set themselves or the chemical attack somewhere within the United States, of course. So very bad. That picture, bottom right, is actually very dangerous. A suicide bomber can fit over there and make a lot of damage. So with the associated consequences, of course, we think on attacks on the population by terrorists, like a chemical agent spread on a major metropolitan area. And these two groups, cartels and terrorists, have a very high risk once we combine it because of these three specific factors that I will be mentioning. Factor number one, extremists have no problem dying for their cause because of higher power and so on and so forth. So essentially, they disregard their own safety. Number two, cartels' incredible and ever-growing supply network makes it a tool for these organizations to transfer what they need to commit these atrocities. And number three, a complete disregard of border security in order to advance political agendas. That means we have a weak border. So cartels, as it is, have a very strong supply line. Terrorists do not care about their own safety, so they will use chemical weapons even if it affects themselves equally. And then we have a really weak border. So these three things really makes the issue a big deal. Once we combine these issues, we can see why I placed it in a high-risk category. Now, for the remarks of this presentation, the risk factor will be considered high as long as we have weak or minimal border security. We simply cannot give this assessment a low risk if we have an open border. What I'm saying here in these remarks is that we simply cannot say that we have security with an open border. The two things, from a security standpoint at least, the two things do not go together. We either have high security in the border, or if we have an open border, of course, it's not going to be safe. Because we know, as I mentioned earlier, cartel organizations, their level of military capabilities, we know that the border is not safe. I don't think that is a secret at this point. So I'm just making the remark here that as long as we have an open border, things will be of high risk on the border itself, because it's open. There is the answer that we are looking for, at least from a security standpoint, from an intelligence standpoint. That is the answer. And last but not least, we have the sources of this presentation. One of them is straight out of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection for the fiscal year 2023. So the information that they have collected so far is in there, the most up-to-date information. And then the New York Post, with 38 people on the terror watch list at southern border. We also have a Senate hearing from the chemical attack on America, and another House hearing of narco-terrorism and the long reach of U.S. law enforcement. That being said, both of those hearings are from a little while ago. They're not the most up-to-date ones. One is from 2005 and the other one is from 2011. That being said, the things discussed in there are more relevant there now than ever. So that's why I still decided to post them as a source for this presentation.